Now, here's Michael Smerconish.
Headlines now from Smerconish.com and the daily newsletter. Yesterday, nearly 10,000 votes cast, 9,857. Should teachers be banned from providing any sort of, quote, classroom instruction on sexual orientation or gender identity, unquote, before the fourth grade? I'm quoting literally from that controversial Florida law. TC, I would swear it was the reverse of this yesterday, but you tell me I'm wrong. 53% said no. 47% said yes. Is that the way that it was running yesterday?
Is that the way that was running when we were on air yesterday? I'm not going to bet my life, but that's definitely the correct run now. In other words, I didn't
That's how it ended.
Correct. I know I don't mess it up because I'm obsessively careful about it. I cut and paste. I don't type it out myself to make sure that I get the right thing, because it does flip.
Okay, so a majority of our audience.
It was close. It was close all day long.
Should teachers be banned? No, they shouldn't be banned.
Yeah,
they should not be banned. To me, the whole issue is the very loose, I'd say sloppy drafting of the Florida law. The word instruction needs to be defined, because if I'm a teacher and I've got a second grader who says to me, oh, look at all these images that we drew of our families. And a second grader says to me, oh, why does Heather have two mommies? The teachers are in the horrible position. If I answer that question with what I think is an appropriate answer about how families can be a mom and dad, or just a dad, or just a mom, or two moms or two dads, families are filled with love. That's what I'd say, and I'd want to keep moving. But now, if I'm a Florida teacher, I have to worry, did I just provide some level of instruction? And have I run afoul of the law? Today, another non-Ukraine subject. Does the success of swimmer Leah Thomas help or hurt the cause of transgender athletes? The University of Pennsylvania swimmer became the first transgender athlete to win a D1 collegiate national championship. This happened yesterday in the 500-yard freestyle being held at the Georgia Institute of Technology. And what I'm really wondering here is whether Leah Thomas having less success would have been so controversial. Arguably not. So is she shining a light in a way that's favorable for advancement of transgender athletes, or because she's doing so well, is this instead a circumstance where people are saying, well, they clearly have an advantage, they meaning transgendered women, and we can't have this? How can we be inclusive and fair? That remains the issue. How is this running?
So over 4,300 votes so far. And interestingly, it is 87.5. So we'll say 88% to... Well, it's really 87.5 to 12.5%.
Oh, my God. Okay.
Strongly.
I wrote it thinking, I don't look for a 90-10 question.
No,
they're not
quite the
fun.
opposite. Right.
I'm looking like for yesterday's question about the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida. Do you want me to guess?
Yeah. Okay.
So you're telling me it's almost 90-10.
Yes.
On the question of does the success of Leah Thomas help or hurt? I'll say roughly 90% are saying hurt.
You are correct.
Interesting.
You are correct.
Okay. Well, plenty
so
of
go
time.
Vote.
Yeah, go vote, go vote. On the front page news today on the situation between Ukraine and Russia, Biden and Xi speaking today. Yesterday, it was Putin and Turkish President Erdogan. The BBC has good coverage, which I appended at Smerconish.com and is in the newsletter today, where there's the framework for a potential deal that could be close at hand if the reporting is accurate and if Putin is telling the truth. There'd be no NATO in Ukraine. There would be a ceding of territory in Russian-speaking areas of far eastern Ukraine. There would be a formal acceptance on the part of Ukraine that Crimea is a part of Russia, and some type of demilitarization on the part of NATO that has to be defined. As the BBC reports, Putin's demands are not as harsh as some people feared, and they scarcely seem to be worth all the violence, the bloodshed, the destruction which Russia has visited on Ukraine. It is a deal, if it's true, that kind of mirrors an essay that we published at Smerconish.com within the last week or 10 days from my friend, the law professor Shane Inspector, who laid out exactly this type of a path. I also recommend, on the subject of Ukraine, a Politico piece by Lawrence Scott Sheets. That, too, is posted and in the newsletter. Who is Sheets? Sheets has worked as a journalist, an analyst, and a diplomat in the countries of the former USSR and has done an analysis of what's been broadcast on state television in the 9 o'clock hour in Moscow. Vremya, V-R-E-M-Y-A is the pronunciation. Quote, I've been watching it frame by frame, not so much for signals on what's happening in Ukraine, but for what is becoming of Russia. And to this trained eye, we would have said in a bygone era, this Kremlinologist, this is what he notes studying, because the messaging that's put out in prime time on Russian TV gives you an insight into where Putin is coming from. So there's this paragraph. Beneath the surface, there are signs that the Kremlin's posture is shifting. These shifts can be seen in changes of language and emphasis, particularly when compared to the messaging of the previous weeks, and they can be seen in the choice of topics. On Thursday, last night, suddenly Putin was focused again on the status of Crimea, despite the fact that its annexation has long been considered a done deal in Russia. Taken together, these shifting messages suggest that at least on some level, Putin understands that all is not going well for Russia, and they may even point to ways that Russia might be beginning to look for a way out. Meanwhile, Putin himself continuing to refer to his opposition as Nats, talks of spitting in the face of people who are protesting against the special operation. So his public posture in Russia is very much Stalinistic, but to a trained eye, there are some subtle changes in him which might evidence a regret in terms of what he is doing. Tell you something else that's interesting. Couple of weeks on CNN, I feel so good that we were ahead of the curve on this. I had a guest named Sam Gregory. He was from a group called Witness. And the subject of the segment that I did on CNN was deepfakes. You may remember, if you were watching that day or if you heard me describe it, that we rolled film footage on television. It's kind of hard to convey this on radio, but we rolled film footage that showed a real Britney Spears and a fake Tom Cruise. And you would never have known the difference in terms of which was authentic and which was fake. The fake, and this is not a lookalike. This is the manipulation of the video process that allowed for a very fake Tom Cruise to have a conversation with a very real Britney Spears. Well, the reason I did the segment and had the expertise of Sam Gregory is that he was making the case that this is something that could become a problem. I don't even think we were thinking in a Ukraine sense. We were really just thinking in a global political sense that, well, there are two issues. One, that now there could be fake video that convinces people it's real. Like the fake Tom Cruise with the real Britney Spears. People could accept as being true. But there's a whole other way of looking at it, and that is that true video now is questioned as being fake. Because, after all, people remember the fake Tom Cruise. Why am I bringing it up today? I'm bringing it up today because it has just happened. And it has happened in this controversy in Ukraine where hackers have dropped a deep fake of President Zelensky, a deep fake video showing Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky asking his soldiers to lay down their weapons has surfaced online amid Russia's ongoing invasion. The altered footage appeared on the website that is of a Russian-speaking language Ukrainian tabloid newspaper. The text claiming that Zelensky had ordered his troops to stand down was also placed on a news ticker during a live television broadcast from Ukraine 24. So it has come to light. They call something the liar's dividend, which is the idea that we've reached the point when any footage that someone can say it would have been faked. This could have been something from a war zone, a politician involved in a scandal, a video that purports to show someone in a compromising position. As we have more and more deepfake technology with realistic depiction, it gives more power, this is the takeaway, to the liars. And I guess finally, in terms of what's new today relative to Ukraine, it is, and TC, you referenced this yesterday when the story broke, but Arnold Schwarzenegger's video, when I came on air today, I think had already surpassed 25 million views, where he invoked his Nazi father.
You know what? My audio is not working.
So, in a rarity for the Austria-born actor, Schwarzenegger candidly invokes his father's dark history as a Nazi sergeant when addressing the Russian government's false claim that troops are engaged in denazification. I'm going to tell you what Schwarzenegger said. My father was injured at Leningrad, and the Nazi army he was a part of did vicious harm to the great city and to its brave people. When my father arrived at Leningrad, he was all pumped up on the lies of government. When he left Leningrad, he was broken physically and mentally. He lived the rest of his life in pain from a broken back, pain from the shrapnel that always reminded him of those terrible years, and pain from the guilt that he felt. To the Russian soldiers listening to this broadcast said, the governor, you already know much of the truth that I'm speaking. You've seen it with your own eyes. I don't want you to be broken like my father. A very rare acknowledgement made by Governor Schwarzenegger as to the role that his father had played in World War II. Something else that I recommended comes from The Spectator. Lionel Shriver writes an essay about the Quinnipiac survey. This is really interesting. Yet another survey question I might use soon at Smerconish.com. People were asked, hey, I'm paraphrasing, you know what's going on in Ukraine. If it were going on in the United States, would you stay and fight, or would you leave the United States? There's a party difference evident in the numbers. Republicans who would stay and fight, 68%. Democrats who would stay and fight, 40%. Independents, right in between at 57%. Those that would leave their country, there were certain that said they weren't sure, and that's why I'm giving it to you both ways. What percentage of Democrats said they would leave the United States in similar circumstances? 52%. Of Republicans, 25%. Again, right in the middle, the independents at 36%. I think that Lionel Shriver has the correct answer, who wrote this analysis for The Spectator, in saying, like, who knows? The real number is probably, if they're honest with themselves, 98% have no idea what they would do until they find themselves in that circumstance. I think that's probably right. It sounds like yesterday's news, but still it's not entirely. Moderna, relative to COVID, is now seeking FDA authorization for a fourth dose of the shot. They asked the Food and Drug Administration to authorize a fourth shot of the COVID-19 vaccine as a booster dose for all adults. And as I've already mentioned on the POTUS program today, you've also got listed at Smerconish.com and in the newsletter today, the Axios reporting on the border crisis that might develop this spring, meaning imminently, if this Title 42 status goes away for those seeking asylum in the United States. More than a million times since March of 2020, Donald Trump's watch, Title 42 has been used to expel migrants at the southern border because of the threat of these folks bringing more COVID infection into the country. But as the pandemic has waned, the Biden administration is under increasing pressure now to do away with Title 42. They say, Axios reporting, that there could be as many as 25,000 migrants already amassed in nearby border towns just waiting for their opportunity to come across the United States-Mexico border. Something offbeat, but really worthy. The Ghislaine Maxwell trial. You know, she was convicted as being the facilitator for Jeffrey Epstein. As part of the voir dire, as part of the jury selection process for the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, the jurors were asked, have you or a friend or family member ever been victim of sexual harassment, abuse, or assault? We all know that so-called juror number 50 lied and did not answer that question truthfully when saying no when the answer was yes, and then when the jury started to deliberate, invoked his own experience into the deliberative process, and Ghislaine Maxwell now has asked for a review of this by the judge. I've questioned, I mean, this may be the rare circumstance. This could be the rare circumstance where the untruthfulness of a juror actually does lead to a new trial. And most of the commentary about this issue has been obviously critical of this particular juror. Farhadian Weinstein, a former federal and state prosecutor, wrote a piece that caught my eye in the New York Times, coming at it from a totally different perspective. Acknowledging initially that the idea is to identify jurors whose experiences could render them unable to be fair and impartial, and therefore, by this logic, it may seem reasonable to ask potential jurors during selection for a sex crime whether they've ever experienced sexual violence. But she then goes on to say, actually, a question like this in the Maxwell case is inappropriate. These queries can turn a sacred civic responsibility into a source of humiliation and disrespect. And one of the reasons that she makes the case that it's not an appropriate question to ask is because sexual violence and by extension sexual harassment has become so pervasive that virtually everybody is going to have a favorable, meaning not favorable, but a positive response to that question. Read that essay. Read that essay. One or two more, if I might. You know that I continue to believe and continue to tell all of you that the United States Senate race in Pennsylvania is the most interesting and potentially the most outcome determinative in terms of control of the U.S. Senate in the nation. We've got a competitive race on the Republican side of the aisle, among others. It features Dr. Oz and Dave McCormick. On the Democratic side of the aisle, among others, it features John Fetterman, who's the lieutenant governor, and Connor Lamb, who's a congressman from Western Pennsylvania. Lamb just picked up the endorsement of the Philadelphia Democratic City Committee, which is a big feather in his cap, particularly where there is a state representative from Philadelphia himself running who was bypassed for Connor Lamb. So keeping our eye on that. And then finally, yesterday I mentioned that Wednesday was the 10th anniversary of number 15, Lehigh University, upsetting number 2, Duke. And it just happened again. This time it wasn't Lehigh and Duke, but it was St. Peter's. How many of us had to look up where St. Peter's is located?
I mean, that was the craziest game. And they, by the way, they played with heart and they played calm and they did not get flustered and they sank all those free throws and they won. In other words, did Kentucky play down? Yes, Kentucky played down, but St. Peter's won that game. That was unbelievable.
I'm regretting not filling out a bracket because I know nothing about any of these teams. And
Michael, that has never, ever stopped me.
And there was probably a 50-50 chance. There's probably a 50-50 that I would have taken St. Peter's.
Because of the Lehigh?
Because I know nothing.
Come on.
No, because I know nothing.
No, because it says, when you fill out the bracket, it says 2 and 15 on it. So you would know that. And always there's someone, but it's usually like 16 and 5 or something, like or 12. Like someone, there's always an upset. But 2 and 15 is crazy.
So
crazy.
Listen to this stat. 20 million brackets have been filled out across the 4 major online games: ESPN, Yahoo,
Huge.
CBS. What is MBCG?
It is one of the like
Gotta be
madness
big.
Something. Yeah.
Okay.
ESPN is the biggie.
Okay. 20 million brackets.
I'm one of them.
How many perfect brackets were one day in? How many remain?
I mean,
192. 192 perfect brackets.
Who are those people?
Who are those people? That's what I wondered.
Because that's crazy.
Yeah.
Truly, like they, you know what, where they all are? New Jersey, because that's where St. Peter's is. Is the only explanation.
Right. They are people in the St. Peter's community.
They have to be.
192 people who have kids in school, or they themselves are students at St.
And they're just doing it by heart. And guess what? They won.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff.
Oh, it's so fun.
It's all fun stuff. All right, there it is. There is the recap of the news of the day, the headlines at Smerconish.com, from the front page, situation in Ukraine, to the sport page, the big upset that everybody is buzzing about with St. Peter's. Make sure you are registered for the daily newsletter, and every day you will have these insights, 7:30 a.m. Philly time, in your in-bin. I'll come back on radio in a moment, and we will take...